a loveless marriage just to make sure I could be with Lena every day.
Mark Consuelos didn't mean to make headlines. He just meant to make his wife laugh. But somewhere between a joke about their dog and a serious question about divorce law, he said something that a lot of people have been quietly wondering for years. And this time he said it with a straight face and a grin live on national television. Here's the moment. During a recent episode of Live with Kelly and Mark, the couple were talking through a real piece of proposed legislation in Pennsylvania, a bill that would change how pets are treated when a marriage ends, essentially giving them a status closer to children in custody disputes. Kelly noted the bill lays out new rules for shared schedules, custody arrangements, and the division of costs tied to a pet once a couple splits. It's the kind of segment that usually stays light, a few minutes of banter, a laugh, then on to the next topic. Except Mark didn't let it stay light. Without missing a beat, he turned to Kelly and said he would stay in a loveless marriage rather than risk being separated from their dog Lena. Then he doubled down, adding, "That's how much I love Lena." Kelly didn't flinch. She joked back that if a loveless marriage was all he was asking for, that could be arranged, and declared it done. The audience lost it. Clips of the exchange spread fast, and within hours headlines were calling it Mark's divorce deal breaker. Fox News +3. On paper it's a throwaway joke. A husband says something absurd about a dog, a wife plays along, everybody laughs, show moves on. But if you sit with it for more than a few seconds, you start to notice something else going on underneath the punchline. Mark Consuelos didn't just make a joke about Lena. He revealed, almost by accident, exactly what kind of marriage he and Kelly Ripa actually have. And it's not the kind most people expect from two people who've spent nearly 30 years being watched by cameras. Let's back up, because the joke only lands if you understand who these two people are and how long they've been building this particular dynamic. Kelly Ripa and Mark Consuelos met on the set of All My Children, where Kelly was already an established soap star and Mark had just joined the cast. Their characters had chemistry written into the script. Their real chemistry wasn't scripted at all. The two eloped in Las Vegas in 1996, quietly, without the kind of rollout most celebrity weddings get today. From there, life moved fast. They built a family, 3 children, Michael, Lola, and Joaquin, while also building 2 separate, very public careers. Kelly stayed on television for decades, eventually becoming one of the most recognizable hosts in American daytime TV. Mark worked steadily in film and television, showing up in projects like Riverdale, while also being known for years, primarily as Kelly Ripa's husband in tabloid shorthand, a label plenty of men would resent, but one he seemed to wear without much friction. Then in 2023 something changed. Mark didn't just stay adjacent to Kelly's show. He joined it full-time as her co-host. That's a genuinely unusual move. Plenty of spouses work in the same industry. Far fewer sit next to each other 5 mornings a week, live, unscripted, and let the entire audience watch how they actually talk to each other. It's one thing to be married. It's another thing to turn your marriage into the format of the show itself. And that's exactly what happened. The chemistry that used to only exist off camera became the whole appeal on camera. So when Mark makes a joke like the Lena line, it's not coming out of nowhere. It's coming out of 2 years of a couple training an audience to understand their specific brand of humor, a brand that leans hard into teasing, exaggeration, and the kind of blunt honesty that would sound alarming from a newer couple but sounds completely normal from 2 people who have clearly been through enough life together to not worry about how a joke lands. Here's what people actually suspected about this marriage, long before the dog comment ever happened. They suspected that Kelly Ripa is not an easy person to keep up with, not because she's difficult but because she is fast, sharp, and has spent decades mastering live television, a skill that looks effortless and absolutely is not. Anyone who has watched her work knows she can pivot mid-sentence, land a joke, recover from a guest going off script, and keep an entire show's rhythm intact without missing a beat. That requires a specific kind of mental stamina. And people suspected that whoever married that energy would either have to compete with it, shrink away from it, or find some third option nobody quite expected. Mark chose the third option. He didn't try to outshine her, and he didn't fade into the background either. Instead, he built a role for himself where he could be the one who gets teased, the one who takes the joke and hands it right back, the one who looks completely secure even when he's the punchline of his own marriage on live television. That's actually a harder job than it looks. A lot of men would bristle at being the Mark in Kelly and Mark. Mark leaned into it, and in doing so, made their dynamic feel less like a power imbalance and more like an actual partnership. One where both people know exactly which role they're playing and neither one seems bothered by it. Now back to Lena, because the dog isn't really a side character in this story, she's become a fairly central one. Kelly and Mark adopted Lena, a Maltese and Shih Tzu mix, in March 2021, and the way they found her says a lot about how their show blends real life with entertainment. She showed up during a pet adoption segment on Live, and the couple fell for the rescue dog on air before officially bringing her home. Before Lena, there was Chewy, a Shih Tzu the family had adopted years earlier through a similar segment on the show. Chewy died last year at 17 years old, and it wasn't something the couple treated lightly on air. Mark told viewers it was one of the toughest things they'd had to do as a married couple, and Kelly, through tears, talked about how much the dog had given their family, especially as each of their kids left home. That detail matters more than it might seem to at first. It tells you that when Mark jokes about staying married just to keep Lena around, he's not being flippant about nothing. He's joking about something that's already proven in this family to carry real emotional weight. Fox News Plus 2. That's really the key to understanding why the Lena joke works instead of sounding alarming. A newer couple joking about a loveless marriage would probably make people uncomfortable. It would sound like there was something real hiding behind the humor, something the couple was avoiding saying out loud. But Mark and Kelly have almost 30 years of receipts. They've shown their audience real grief over losing a pet. They've shown genuine partnership on a live show that requires trust every single morning. They've shown a family that grew up mostly out of the tabloid spotlight, 3 kids who are now adults with their own lives. So when Mark throws out a line like that, the audience doesn't hear a warning sign. They hear 2 people who are comfortable enough with each other and secure enough in what they've built to joke about the most serious-sounding scenario without it landing as anything but funny. There's also a broader life stage happening here that's worth naming directly, because it explains a lot about why Lena has become such a big part of their on-air dynamic recently. Their children are grown. Michael is 29, Lola is 25, and Joaquin is 23. That means Kelly and Mark are firmly in the empty nest years, the stage where the daily structure that used to organize a household, school mornings, sports schedules, homework, curfews, simply isn't there anymore. A lot of couples find that transition harder than they expect. The kids leaving doesn't just free up time. It removes a kind of shared project that used to sit at the center of the relationship, and couples have to figure out what replaces it. For Kelly and Mark, some of that space has clearly been filled by Lena. She's the one who still needs someone to let her out in the morning. She's the one who gets fussed over, worried about, and joked about in mock custody battles. She's become the low-stakes outlet for the kind of parental energy that doesn't just disappear once your kids move out. None of that makes the joke less funny. If anything, it makes it more relatable because plenty of people who've raised kids and watched them leave the house know exactly what it feels like to suddenly redirect that attention toward a pet. It's an incredibly normal, incredibly human adjustment, and Mark and Kelly happened to turn it into a bit that resonated with millions of people who are either living through the same thing or watching it coming. What makes this couple different from a lot of celebrity marriages that get put under a microscope is that they've never really tried to sell perfection. Watch enough daytime television and you'll notice plenty of couples perform a very polished version of togetherness. Every compliment on cue, every story landing exactly where it's supposed to, nothing rough around the edges. It can be pleasant to watch, but it can also feel a little distant, like you're seeing a highlight reel instead of an actual relationship. Kelly and Mark do something different. Their banter has edges. They interrupt each other. They call each other out. They openly tease one another about habits, quirks, and, apparently, their relative devotion to a rescue dog. That only works if there's real trust underneath it, because without trust, that kind of teasing turns sharp and uncomfortable fast. With trust, it becomes rhythm, the kind of shorthand 2 people build after decades of actually knowing each other, where a single line can carry 20 years of context and the other person catches it instantly. That's ultimately what Mark's comment revealed, whether he meant to reveal it or not. He wasn't confessing that his marriage is secretly unhappy. He was demonstrating, in real time, exactly how secure 2 people can become after almost 3 decades together. Secure enough to joke about the most dramatic-sounding scenario imaginable and have it land as comedy instead of concern. It takes a level of comfort that most couples, celebrity or otherwise, take years and years to build. You don't get to joke casually about a loveless marriage, unless everybody watching, including your spouse, already knows there's nothing loveless about it. It's also worth pointing out how unusual their whole arc has been, structurally. They met working together, playing a couple on a soap opera. They became a real couple, got married quickly and quietly, built a family largely outside the spotlight while their individual careers grew. And then, decades later, they ended up working together again, this time not as scripted soap stars but as themselves, co-hosting a live morning show where the entire premise depends on their real relationship being interesting enough to watch every single day. That's a strange loop for any 2 people to go through, and it's part of why their dynamic reads as authentic rather than manufactured. If ABC had simply paired two attractive hosts together and told them to have chemistry, audiences would likely sense the difference. Mark and Kelly aren't performing a marriage for the show. The marriage existed first, fully formed for decades, long before the cameras were rolling on both of them together every morning. That history is exactly why a joke like the Lena line doesn't read as a red flag. It reads as evidence of a couple who has been through enough real life, young parenthood, two demanding careers, public scrutiny, the loss of a beloved pet, kids growing up and moving out, to know that their connection isn't hanging on a single sentence said for a laugh. Long marriages aren't built on one feeling staying exactly the same for 30 years. They shift shape. Sometimes it's romance. Sometimes it's straightforward friendship. Sometimes it's loyalty that doesn't need to be explained. Sometimes it's simply two people who've learned each other's rhythms so well that a joke about the dog can stand in for an entire conversation about how far they've come. So what did Mark Consuelos actually admit, underneath the laugh in the headline? Not that he wants out. Not that there's trouble behind the scenes. What he admitted, in the most roundabout way possible, is that his marriage to Kelly Ripa has reached the stage where nothing needs to be protected by careful, polished language anymore. They can say the most dramatic thing imaginable about their relationship and turn it into one of the biggest laughs of the show because everybody involved, Mark, Kelly, and the audience that has followed them for years, already knows exactly how solid the real thing is. A marriage that fragile couldn't survive that joke. A marriage that's actually built to last can turn it into one of its best bits. And if the family's history with Chewy and now Lena says anything, it's that when Kelly and Mark do get emotional on camera, it's real, which makes the moments they choose to laugh about even more telling. They know the difference between what's actually fragile and what isn't, and Lena, it turns out, is safely, hilariously, in the second category.